Fine.
All right, perfect. Very good. Well, thanks very much for the opportunity to be here today. And I'll say, even though I'm a longtime fan of VR, and we do a lot of work or have done a lot of work in VR with VR companies over the years in my law firm, this is actually my first time to present in VR, and it's kind of exciting. So I really appreciate the opportunity to do that. Um, so first of all, just and this is a short talk, and but as the title suggests here, there's unfortunately a lot of bad news of bad news recently in our space. But hopefully, in the next few minutes, we will be able to also discuss some opportunities that have arisen and some ways to successfully deal with this really unprecedented situation for our business. First of all, just briefly about me, and apologies. Sorry, Jeremy. Okay? Did I do it right? All right. So yeah, my firm is Gamma Law. We're based in San Francisco, and we are a specialized law firm. We work in 3 or 4 media tech verticals, one of which is VR AR. We've been in the space for a number of years now, and have had the opportunity to work with some really interesting companies there. Looks like I'm going the wrong way. Apologies. All right. So as we can see here, VR spending, and I'm sure that no one's surprised by this here today, but location-based VR spending has just had a terrible impact over the last several months, estimated down by 75% for this year. However, we are seeing projections that this amount will recover. It's just how long it's going to take. And at least from this particular source, GameDev.net, they're estimating another couple years. This is a chart from actually from May, but I think it's still interesting to look at. Basically, people's responses to the question of, based on what you know about the coronavirus, when will you feel comfortable visiting the following? And pretty much the restaurants and cafes had the people were most confident in going back to those relatively soon, at least within, say, 3 to 6 months for most people. And then, not surprisingly, now we're seeing amusement parks, concerts, theaters, and museums. Really, people are just not confident about returning to those locations anytime soon. So, of course, LBE types of venues, comparable to, say, amusement parks, maybe theaters. So, unfortunately, what this suggests is that, a good number of people are not going to feel confident returning to these spaces anytime soon. It's worth noting, this may have limited relevance to the target audience of a VR LBE. I mean, as we've seen, for better or for worse, it does seem to be younger people that are more confident sort of being out and feel less constrained about the current situation. So it seems likely for that reason, and perhaps some other reasons that we'll discuss here, that that we may see audiences returning to location-based VR establishments at a much quicker rate than that suggests. Similar here on the next slide, when, if ever, do you expect to attend the following? And sort of similar results, about maybe, let's say, a fifth to a third of the people, 20% to 33%, will go back pretty much anywhere once they reopen. And then we've got like another third who say, if there's a vaccine. And then interestingly, we have 15–20% who say, I'm just never going back to a concert. I'm never going to go to a movie again. I'm never going to go to an amusement park again. So that seems a little bit questionable, but relevant anyway as we consider what might be ahead for our space. Family entertainment centers, of course, have been challenged throughout the space, not just, of course, when we're talking about location-based VR venues. And one challenge has been partly the fact that this space really had only recently begun to get traction. It only recently, it seems that we had really begun to get big investments into the space after many years of not much happening in this area. So, many of these cases, we have these businesses have high debt and high operating costs. And so there is an estimate that they need to be pretty close back to where they were pre-COVID in order to survive. So we do have a couple examples here of sort of the headline VR location-based centers and how they have fared through COVID here. And unfortunately, the story is not good, as has been well publicized. Of course, Sandbox VR, which had lots of headlines about celebrity investors and all the glitzy locations, is now in bankruptcy. It is Chapter 11 bankruptcy, so there's a possibility that it will reopen. But current plans anyway are that if and when it reopens, it's going to be on a much smaller scale. Similarly, the Void remains closed today. Very expensive, high-profile locations, although unfortunately for the Void, principally in high tourist areas, and of course those areas like Las Vegas, like the Disney perimeter locations have seen a really dramatic drop-off in tourist traffic. Challenges to reopening any of these centers, of course, are mandated social distancing, which means lower capacity, lower revenue, and then, of course, the additional safety measures and the higher labor costs that result from that. So we all know about the bad news, and it's not surprising to see that these high-profile businesses are struggling, and we also know that a good many of the small LBEs have unfortunately closed. But what's possibly some good news here, or at least some opportunities? We put here some survival strategies, some ideas. So first of all is engagement of customers. And, most LBEs have email addresses. This is certainly not nothing, no rocket science here, but to the extent that we can maintain engagement with customers, particularly the higher value customers, let's say those who may be holding, annual passes or who, have come with groups in the past, or, organizations that have rented out the space. To the extent we can really kind of maintain a connection with those customers, that certainly will help when the time comes to reopen. Upgrading experiences, adding additional features, food and beverage, etc. This could also have benefits and at least sort of may help to keep us top of mind until the time comes to fully reopen. And then finally, of course, like so many other businesses today, promoting all the steps that we are taking to promote to maintain the safety of visitors. That's going to be something that is helpful. All right, skipped a slide there. So another strategy for survival during this period could be some diversification from the consumer audience, consumer visitors, to businesses. And of course, we've certainly seen that shift over the last few years in VR generally. But to the extent that we can reach out to businesses who may be interested in using our locations for various functions and for events, etc., where it's easier to manage people, that's certainly another opportunity. An example here, Spaces, of course, famously acquired by Apple. It apparently is being completely reconfigured away from location-based into strictly technology company, developing VR technology add-ons for virtual services like Zoom and Hangouts. Probably not a strategy, unfortunately, it's going to be available to everyone, but one to consider. Now, one thing that I think is interesting in terms of potential strategies is the 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 possibility to kind of piggyback on all the interest that has grown in VR for business purposes here since the pandemic began. And of course, we're seeing, dramatic increases in usage of VR and consumer acceptance of VR as we have seen so much of business begin to shift into VR spaces, principally for internal meeting purposes and also for great events like this one. But I think we're going to continue to see that develop. And one really interesting possibility is for venues to begin to rent out as sort of studios that potentially could connect other VR locations for purposes like high value meetings, let's say negotiation sessions, where you have one team at a VR location studio in their city and another team maybe in another country, sitting in a similarly equipped studio, and they're able to have a really close to in-person sort of experience that goes beyond Zoom. So it seems to me that's a really interesting possibility to sort of network the different VR locations. And the same sort of model could be imagined, let's say, in other contexts as well, for example, like trade shows and other types of remote sessions. Yeah, and some other ideas we came up with, continuing with this idea of having these LBEs sort of connected together. You can have parties, virtual escape rooms. There's also the possibility, as we have seen this increase in demand for VR in the business sector, there's also the possibility that equipment can be rented out, headsets can be rented out. There's currently, some businesses are having difficulty procuring the equipment they need to sort of gear up into VR. So just in our last couple of minutes here, this is a slide that some of you may have seen, which shows kind of the recovery time after other major societal events and, how long it took for various businesses to regain their revenue. It's kind of hard to compare what we're going through now to these other events like, let's say, 9/11, but it does seem that that recovery period could be anywhere from 1 to 6 months. Of course, the big question is, when does that start? Does it start when we have a vaccine? Does it start when there's a certain lower rate of infections, etc.? So running out of time here, but I thought this slide was worth showing. This is minutes consumed by active VR stations at LBEs, and we're seeing here a really nice upward trajectory since April. Unfortunately, we can't be certain that this really reflects a strong recovery in the location-based VR business for a number of reasons. First of all, this is monthly minutes per VR station, and of course, unfortunately, we have seen many of these go offline. So, so this doesn't tell the full story, but helpful just the same, I think. And then finally, since we are a law firm working with companies in the VR space, I should mention there may be ways that legally that operators of LBEs can reduce expenses until traffic begins to return, and this can include negotiations under your lease, concessions under agreements with vendors, possibly credit terms, and even possibly an outside financing. So that's all for me today. Thanks very much. And I don't know that we have time for questions, but I'll certainly be happy to hang out here up at the front afterwards if anyone would like to discuss further.